If your warehouse runs on sticky notes, crossed fingers, and one person who just knows where stuff is, it's time for Endpoint. They connect your shop, stock, and shipments so you can stop playing hide and seek with inventory, and Gary can take some time off. Get real-time visibility and your sanity back at endpointas.com. And if you upgrade your warehouse before December 31st, you can take advantage of no payments for 90 days and 0% financing for up to 36 months. You may also be eligible to deduct up to 100% of your qualifying investment under Section 179. Consult your tax advisor to confirm eligibility. Terms and conditions apply. Learn more at endpointas.com. That's endpointas.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. On today's episode, I am going to have a good friend of the podcast back on, James Malley. He's the co-founder and CEO of Paccurate, and he's coming on because he just hit an amazing milestone, and Paccurate hit an amazing milestone of 1 billion packs processed. And we're going to ask him, what does that mean to him? And what's that all about? And also talk a little bit about how they're coming up with this idea of a packing control system, another system in the warehouse. We're going to learn about that and how it's going to benefit you. And we're just going to hear a little bit too about some of the Paccurate stories, since we've had James on several times at this point, but also quite kind of in the beginning as well. So a little bit about how that journey has been going. So James, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me back.
Of course. Always happy to talk to you, whether it's recorded or not. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, sir. So good to connect with you here. And for those that are not familiar, I guess tell us a little bit about Paccurate, what it is you do, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about the origin story, which I saw you posted recently on LinkedIn about a spatula. So how does this all come together here?
Yeah. So I think, a lot of your audience will know what cartonization is, but if there are any that don't, if you've ever received a package on your doorstep with a tiny item rattling around inside a big box, cartonization is supposed to stop that. It's supposed to figure out the most appropriate box or mailer for any given parcel shipment. So that's at a very high level what we do. And the journey has been, if I had to sum it up, it's been from like hobby and then obsession. And then I think more recently, dare I say it, long lasts, a little bit of validation.
Okay. That's good. It's good to get to that point, right?
For sure.
Yeah. So very interesting there. And obviously, cartonization, a huge thing, as, we've seen just the parcel quantity and volume just exponentially increase over the last several years, and not slowing down, right, at any point, it seems like. So obviously a critical part in there. So tell us a little bit about how the idea came about. Tell us a little bit about this spatula story.
So the spatula came, call it like halfway through the last decade of being fixated on this. But early days, my co-founder Pat and I were building technology integrations, apps, and things for shippers. And they started to feel the pressure from dimensional weight rating, which had been kind of the standard for air shipping, but then became more prolific for ground. And it was really starting to eat into margins. So some of our clients said, hey, Pat, James, can you just do what you do? Go find something. There must be something to solve this problem. Go find it. and integrate it the way that you do. And we didn't really find anything that we felt was flexible enough to solve the problem. We didn't really want to be like, our lives spent doing professional services, tweaking code and stuff like that. And so but it just became this, this fixation for us, because I think we were blown away by kind of how tiny tweaks had pretty profound kind of downstream implications, not just on cost, but on, sustainability.
Sure.
But there were years of, occasionally an SMB, small company, would come in and sign up, and we'd go, yay, all right, back to our normal job. But then, to your point, the spatula incident, it was the beginning of the pandemic. It sounds like a band. Yeah. The beginning of the pandemic, all these carrier surcharges and fees and the rates got hiked up. Pretty much every cost went up associated with parcel shipping. And so a lot of, established companies kind of said, whoa, and took a step back and said, all right, what haven't we been doing that we could do to lower our costs so our margins are not getting clobbered like they are right now? And cartonization, packing efficiency was one of them. And so a big retailer reached out because a badly packed box went viral on social media with a pretty prolific influencer. The CEO got wind of it and just went on a warpath internally to be like, why are we shipping boxes that are, 90% full of dunnage or fill?
Yeah.
And, so the poor packaging engineers and IT people who would, never heard directly from the CEO before were panicking.
Yeah.
And eventually, found us, because cartonization is not a very crowded market. So you can Google, packing efficiency, and chances are, even in the early days, that we would pop up. And so we had our own moment of panic, because this was a big retailer. We were still working our day job of consulting and supporting other clients. And anyway, that kind of kicked off the transformation into Paccurate and our focus today.
Interesting. So from kind of a little side project to the spatula incident, as we'll call it, and now to 1 billion packs, right? So what does that mean? 1 billion packs? That means 1 billion packages have been processed through Paccurate?
Yeah, so it's a combination of things. So there is some shopping cart, because we do have some companies that use our API to get better rates in their shopping carts, because you can only really do that if you know exactly what packaging you're going to use for any given shipment. But it's a combination of that and actual packages that we've optimized at the pack station in the warehouse. And 1 billion, it took over 11 years I think, to get there. So, but in fairness, most of it has been within the last 18 to 24 months.
Really interesting. And so you mentioned earlier about kind of getting to this point after some time and getting validation, you said. So tell us a little bit about, what does, 1 billion packs going through the Paccurate ecosystem and everything you do. I mean, what does that kind of validate in the market as something that it sounds like you've known for a while, right? But how does that kind of give that further validation?
Yeah, I think, packing and packaging has always been a high impact kind of lever. And, early days, it just wasn't, for whatever reason, it wasn't a focus for most companies. They were more focused on labor or, some other things in the warehouse. And I think we kind of came to believe a couple things, like B2B SaaS selling in supply chain is not rational, because we could present, an ROI that was we can save you $3 million this year.
Yeah. And
they'd say, well, yeah, but labor, I got to put this robotic, picking thing in because it'll save us $300,000. And so just
yeah,
there are cases where it's irrational, but I think also priorities are driven by the operators, and certain things that happen in the warehouse are just more visceral feeling. And so labor, working with people, is very visceral and frustrating and sometimes elating. It's like it's very top of mind for operators. And so, the past couple of years, we've really been on this journey of like, how do we demonstrate this in a way that feels more visceral? So instead of saying like, X number of square feet of corrugate reduced, change it into football fields, or even go more bespoke, change it into, we would, blanket the top of your warehouse 17 times with the amount of corrugate we'll save you over the next 6 months. So storytelling, I think, was a big part of it. But I would say just the last like year and a half, the industry is just much more focused on packaging than they ever have before. And I'm not, I'm not drinking my own Kool-Aid enough to think that we're the reason for that. But I think just the costs have shot up with transportation and materials so much that it's just we're in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, very interesting. And that's a really interesting point there about, these solutions, like you said, right? Like, it's like, oh, we can save you 3 million, but they're like, well, no, we got to focus on this one that's going to save us 300,000, right? I mean, I think, that visibility and also just kind of the awareness of like, because no matter what, like whether the package is, the right size or not, like it's going out the door, right? So It's kind of like, well, this is still humming, this is still running. So I love that you're taking it and spinning it into like something that more people can kind of wrap their head around. Like, what is the impact, the vast impact potentially of what you're doing, and I think that helps for sure, right? Because it is kind of like, whether the box is too big or whatever the case is, it's still going to go in a sense, right? So it's hard to like feel like, okay, I got to stop and think about that more clearly. So it's interesting, kind of the level of awareness you're bringing to this and how you're bringing it to. I think it's really interesting. So now this kind of next phase as part of this 1 billion pack announcement. You also talked about a packing control system, a PCS. Are we getting another acronym here, James, in the warehouse world? Tell us what this is all about.
Yeah, I think startups. It's almost a cliche that they start out saying we're creating a new category for X, for underwater basket weaving, for whatever the the niche is. And so we always hesitated to kind of frame things that way, because we're not just doing the packing instructions anymore. There's monitoring, there's simulation, there's kind of evaluating SOPs and testing them in a digital twin. So the platform is fairly robust, and our kind of the way we've conceptualized it, just watching the way that our customers use it, we're like, this is really, it's like not a WMS at all. It's really solely focused on managing packing and packaging performance. And so we felt like, all right, 1 billion packs, we'll never have a better opportunity to say this with a straight face, like, and say it earnestly.
Sure.
Like, we think whether it's Paccurate or not, we think the stakes with cost and with the environment are high enough to say, yes, this problem deserves its own 3-letter acronym to live alongside WMS, WCS, WES, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that makes sense too. I mean, kind of, and I think it gives that distinction as well to kind of to what we were just talking about previously, right? And like on seeing it and wrapping your head around like, what is it, and giving it, that system distinction, I think makes a lot of sense. That like, hey, this isn't just something that's just a little plug-in or add-on or something. Like, this is making an actual impact and doing something within your operation and your organization. So this, from a system perspective, I'm curious from like a user perspective that's on the floor, somebody that would be packing, right? I mean, how are they interacting with the system versus like interacting with the WMS? Like, how does that look side by side?
Yeah, so we're API first, and not just because that's the only thing we had in the beginning, but that everything kind of like flows from this point of execution of, you got a package or you got a shipment. whether you're, putting boxes on a robot or, you're putting stuff in a tote and it's going to a pack station. What is the best way to pack this? And we go pretty down the rabbit hole. So we'll incorporate carrier, negotiated carrier contracts, your, labor costs, material costs, et cetera, and find that answer. So the packers are mostly just getting direction. Some folks might, throw up the 3D visual of the pack to help, but often enough, it's just tell me what box or what boxes are appropriate for this order. The next level up is kind of like the managers or the operations kind of leaders or people who are in charge of that warehouse, where we found the biggest point of friction for solving this problem outside of, just an optimization algorithm was really just allowing them to have control over what was going on. Most common kind of, scenario that we see is somebody tried to solve a problem and they can't change whatever cartonization they might have because it requires either, bribing their IT team with a basket of muffins or something, and begging to get on the roadmap because those folks are already, pretty busy, or trying to free up some budget to pay the WMS to make a tweak to a hard-coded kind of cartonization feature. And so in most cases, that's just like neither are going to work. And so what we've seen is that people try to fix problems with process. As an example, there's a retailer that we work with now, but when we first met them, they had been dealing with damage, and the operations lead got a call from their customer support leader and said, "Hey, that vase that we've been shipping like crazy, every single customer said it shows up completely busted, like obliterated into a million pieces." Yeah. and so he went through that routine. He talked to IT. No, we're busy. He tried to get a quote from the WMS, and it was just too much. And so he's like, "Well, there's nothing I can do except just tell my packers, just put everything in bubble wrap, like an extra 4 feet." And so
expensive.
And file it under, the unintended consequences kind of initiative. But obviously transportation costs went up, and what is this guy going to do? Like you gave me a mandate and I executed it the only way that was available. And so what we've tried to do is take things like that, like SOPs, and put them in a place where that person has access to. So that person can say, okay, anytime that vase shows up, have the system just dictate that it needs to be wrapped or needs to be packed, whatever the rule is that's effective, and then push it live, or test it first just to make sure you're not, getting crazy transportation cost increases, and then deploy it live without, worrying about code changes or anything. So that is, I wouldn't call it the least complicated part of the platform, but it's the most straightforward, and I think the most impactful from a pure, like, just giving control back to the warehouse standpoint.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's, a great example there of, like, without kind of the technology and the analysis and the visibility into, like, looking at each kind of individual order and product to be able to know exactly how to handle it, right? Just give like just a blanket directive, right? And what happens, right? Like you said, the transportation goes up. Obviously, the bubble wrap cost goes up in that situation, right? You're shipping crazy amount of bubbles there, and then the time too, right? From a labor perspective, because that's going to take longer to pack in that situation. So there's a lot of, like, kind of, I guess, these reciprocal benefits aside from just saving corrugate that kind of comes out of this as well. So tell us a little bit about, what are you seeing in the market right now as some challenges that are coming up more and more that you're able to solve for with this system?
Yeah, certainly, automation, the kind of great promise of automation is that it can reduce some cost, right? So when companies are tightening their belts, paying tariffs, there's uncertainty. You would think that there would be a universal pullback on investment in these things, but I haven't really seen that yet a lot. Some companies are kind of wait and see mode for sure, but I see just as many kind of leaning in and being like, okay, we actually have to put this automation project that we've been talking about in place because our margins are shrinking, and we don't know, if our customers are going to suffer us passing along all these costs to them. So, and then, the ones I get excited about because I'm super biased is, all the ones that have anything to do with packaging.
Yeah.
So I think, AMR systems where it actually increases their ROI if their packaging is more optimized. We've been seeing that a lot. We're getting much more involved with AMR projects. And if you'd asked me that 3 years ago, I would have said you're crazy, but it's, yeah, I mean, it makes intuitive sense. Those systems, you need to fit as much work on them as possible, as many order lines as possible. And in a pick to box, scenario, the packaging has to be optimized and the packing of things into those boxes have to be optimized as well.
Interesting. So you're utilizing it on the AMR. Is I guess it's only effective for pick to box, or does it work if there's like bins on there as well?
Yeah, I mean, our stuff has been used for pick to tote. Okay. I mean, our stuff has been used for all kinds of off-brand things, including a rocket cargo for astronauts. But so that was the most like out there use case. But yeah, totes, spatial optimization. A box could be a tote, or a container, or a room.
Gotcha. Interesting. So in that scenario, from an AMR perspective, they're basically utilizing the system to figure out exactly how to like place them as they're picking them within that box to maximize. Is that, am I getting that correct? Yeah.
Yep. And it has in the case of AMRs, it has a outsized impact on the performance. Yeah. So I think one of the last projects we did, we found if we could increase the cubic utilization of the robot shelf by 16%, it increased the ROI of the whole system by like 30 or 40%.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Just the nature of how it works. The more work you get on a single bot, in most cases, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it increases the utilization, certainly, right? And does that in turn lead to, because I know we've talked about previously how, the cartonization leads to less trucks essentially being shipped on the road and moved and things like that. I mean, does this potentially, from an AMR application, does it reduce the number of potential AMRs you might need in a fleet?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I don't want to get in trouble with all AMR vendors that I love and respect.
Yes, that want to sell more AMRs.
Yeah, totally. So I will say, I mean, it's the same thing actually with ASRS, where you can do some interesting optimizations with the bins and therefore need a smaller grid size. Mm-hmm. We got pushback early on from like things like this, where we were like in conflict with somebody's interests in the industry, and we kind of had to like tiptoe around and being like, we're not taking business away. Yeah. I think over the last year or so, I've noticed, not universally, but I've noticed a lot of vendors, whether it was AMR or even packaging manufacturers or distributors, care much less about that, about reducing, so they sell 10% fewer, robots to one customer. They're kind of more interested in, stickiness and value, like ROI. And I don't know if that's a function of just, the times that we're in, or, that some of these spaces, particularly AMR, is just, there's like 300 vendors worldwide. So you gotta show that you care. Well, two things. One, that you care what the customer cares about and is thinking about, but also just that you have the capability to really solution engineer something to be as efficient as possible.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Breckham Group, a supply chain consulting firm built by operators and engineers, not just advisors. Their experienced team helps companies bridge the gap between strategy and execution inside distribution centers using a proven framework called Precision Supply Chain Operations. The result? Faster performance, greater efficiency, and real ROI. If you need speed, precision, and measurable results, visit breckhamgroup.com. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an interesting observation, like on the market there, because I think there is, it seems like we are kind of getting past, at least in that category, like getting past some of the experimental phase, right? In a sense, right? So these customers, as you said, like they want ROI, like they want things to work, like, it just needs to be efficient, needs to be effective, and get the job done, right? It's no longer like a little bit of a test, and obviously there's a ton of variety, as you mentioned there, with all the different vendors now that are doing kind of similar movement of this material in the picking stream or otherwise. So very interesting there. Now I'm curious, like, what do you see from who is like the typical catalyst in the operation to start looking at this cartonization and this like packaging perspective? Because you mentioned, like, from like your spatula incident, right, that the packaging engineers were like, well, like, why are we hearing from the CEO? This is very bizarre, right? But I mean, is this typically like an initiative that gets started from like a packaging team, or is it more from like an operational team on the floor, like those managers looking to do some continuous improvement or something like that? I mean, where do you typically see people starting to kind of explore your solution and coming to you?
Yeah, I'd say mostly VP of Ops,
Okay.
because they have the best kind of like bird's eye view of everything going on. They might not be like intimately familiar with what their packers are doing, but they can at least get most of the KPIs kind of bubbled up to them. They're probably also hearing from, the C-suite and somebody on the transportation side. There's always been this kind of, I wouldn't say a division, but like a mild chasm between operations folks and transportation folks in enterprise. And sometimes they have trouble, kind of conveying what they need to the other. That's just my observation. But when transportation costs just like shoots up, like, a month ago when the carriers put the new rounding rules in place, transportation folks are trying to figure out how to deal with this in as many ways as possible, and may throw like a mandate, and they're like, you have to fix this problem. You have to make our boxes half an inch small, whatever it is. So there might be like an external catalyst, like a spatula incident that kicks the whole thing off.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think it's really interesting to hear kind of like, where does that thinking start, right? And like, who starts to think about, we need one less, 2 centimeters less on the cardboard or something like that. And I think that's very interesting. So now when we look at it, I have an interesting question for you, actually. I asked you this on LinkedIn last night. I'm not sure if you know this stat, but 1 billion packs processed, right? And the whole idea of cartonization, right, is reducing the amount of corrugate that's going out there and the amount of air essentially that's shipping and moving around. So if you've processed 1 billion packs, right, how many more packages would that have potentially been if they were not going through like the Paccurate engine?
It's kind of hard to say if, like, I don't actually know what the grand total is in terms of like carton reduction, because for some customers, our algorithm ends up packing into more smaller boxes. It's just the nature of their contract and SKU profile.
Yeah.
Others, there might be more consolidation. Like the biggest companies have negotiated a lot of rates in such a way that just chuck everything in a single box and call it a day. I will say we do carefully measure, though, total material. So I think we looked, and right now we're saving, assuming we never had any growth, we're saving about 7,200 and something tons of CO2 equivalent per year just based on reduced corrugate. Or I should say our customers are with our help. And then an additional, if you're feeling really generous, you want to say everybody's using craft paper and not plastic as a fill material.
Sure.
It's another like 2,000-ish tons a year. So these are the things we get like really excited about internally.
Yeah. And I think it is really amazing because that's, huge savings, like from a cost perspective for your customers, I can only imagine, but also from like an environmental perspective too. Like, there's so many like tangential benefits of what you're doing. I think is really, really exciting there. So very interesting to hear that. And I was curious what you were going to say there. I thought I was going to test your stats knowledge. So very cool. And so now if we look towards the future, aside from 2 billion packs, what's next for Paccurate?
Well, I was just at a small conference called Sea Change. I don't know if you heard of this one, but it was really focused on packaging and EPR, so extended producer responsibility laws that a bunch of U.S. states are trying to figure out. So I think compliance is going to be a pretty big deal for us over the next 12 months, call it, especially, companies that have operations in the EU. PPWR is the big, gigantic EU legislation that, tries to reduce plastic and regulates materials, but it has a big provision that says every shipment must be at least 50% full of goods. That's, to like a civilian or somebody outside a supply chain, that sounds like totally like, yeah, of course. Like how hard can that be?
Yeah,
it's actually really hard. It's actually really hard. And so, the things that we've been releasing and developing are kind of helping companies get ready for that and monitor it over time.
Interesting. Yeah. Because I think they had some legislation recently, right, that was proposed, or I don't know if it passed in New Jersey even, right? Where
New Jersey hasn't passed yet, but there are like a dozen states that are working on this in various capacity. A heavy focus on recyclability, some compostability, and then some of them are inspired by PPWR and have started including language about fill rates.
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah. And I think it'd be interesting to see that evolution. So is that something like that you provide now that's already in the system, or is that something that's like developing?
Yeah. So we have a monitoring tool that we call Pack Health. And the whole genesis of that was, a lot of even operations people that are in their, warehouse all day might miss something that's gone wrong with packaging and won't know until the CFO calls, angry. And so that was kind of the genesis of building Pack Health. It's just monitoring, so you can see if things go sideways or get notifications. That's really been where we've focused most of the effort of how can we build features into this so that folks can not just compliance, but also just be a little bit closer to the sustainability metrics. Because increasingly these companies have stakeholders that, past their chief sustainability officer or chief impact officer that want access to these numbers because they set a goal, CO2 reduction goal or whatever it is. And so that's really the part of the platform where we've been focused on for compliance as well.
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah. And I think it's great to have that visibility and just know kind of like, this is effective, this is working, and this is what we're doing and our impact overall. And then, being compliant too, certainly is a good thing as well. So very interesting to talk to you here today, James, and learn a little bit about the packing control system, the PCS. So I have to use that one the next time I do the supply chain acronym game at a conference. Do you know what PCS is? We're going to test it out there in the market for you, James.
Yeah, test it out. If you ask them if they know what it is, then suddenly they'll Google it. So
Yeah,
You should definitely
that'd
do
be
that.
good. Yeah, right. We're working together. We're collaborating. So, yeah, very good. So very great, and congratulations on 1 billion packs and beyond. And hopefully you get to 1 trillion at some point, and you keep continuing to grow and get that validation and be out there. So, if people want to learn more about Paccurate and they want to do better at their packing, what's the best way to get started?
They can go to paccurate.io and get in touch. We'll run a free analysis. So even if we don't end up working together, they can see, how they're doing versus the rest of the market.
All right, fantastic. And we'll definitely put that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well as in the show notes here. So, James, thank you so much for your time on the show today, and congratulations once again.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.